The Montreal Canadiens relied heavily on defenseman Butch Bouchard for 15 seasons. His robust play contributed to the Habs' defense, while his alert passing was an integral component of the team's exemplary transitional game. Bouchard was a tall and strong competitor who used his physical attributes to advantage, although he was never known as a bully by his peers. The Montreal native gained valuable amateur experience with the Verdun Maple Leafs and Montreal Junior Canadiens. Late in the 1940-41 season, the Canadiens sent him to the Providence Reds of the Isle for a 12-game trial. Bouchard exhibited tremendous poise and impressed coaches by registering 3 goals in his relatively short minor pro stint. The young Riarguard made his biggest impression at the Canadiens' training camp prior to the 1941-42 season. Unlike some of the veterans, and rare for the day, he was in top physical condition from the outset of the pre-season. He upset some of his teammates with his tough physical approach to practices. The Canadiens hadn't fared well in recent years and, if anything, they required an injection of youthful passion to help ignite the team again. This may have been one of Bouchard's most important contributions to the organization. Bouchard developed into a tough stay-at-home defenseman whose physical game was a superb complement to defense partner Doug Harvey, one of the game's all-time great rushing blueliners. And it shouldn't be overlooked that Bouchard's exceptional hockey sense and accurate passing often started the offensive rushes for which the Canadiens became famous in the 1940s and 1950s. Physically, Bouchard was remarkably strong and often broke up fights on the ice by grabbing hold of each combatant with his enormous hands. To his credit, he never abused his powerful attributes, and most opponents wisely avoided provoking him. In turn, he rarely fought. On retiring, Bouchard turned his interests to amateur hockey in the Montreal area. While serving as one of the veterans of the Habs blue line in the early 1950s, he had derived a great deal of satisfaction from tutoring younger defensemen, and Canadiens management considered him briefly to replace Dick Irvin as coach before settling on Toe Blake. Instead, he began working as a coach and president of junior teams in the province, which proved to be a logical and rewarding move for the recently retired star. Prior to the 1968-69 season, he was named president of the Metropolitan Junior A Hockey League. One of Bouchard's first ideas was the organization of an all-star game between his Metro League and the Quebec Provincial Junior Circuit. The proceeds from such a contest would be placed in an emergency fund to be spent on players who were permanently hurt playing the game. Butch Bouchard took his rightful place in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1966. 42 years later, he was honored with the National Order of Quebec. The order, which was presented to Bouchard by the Premier of Quebec, Jean Charest, is conferred upon men and women who are either residents of Quebec or were born there for outstanding achievements in most fields. In 2009, he was made a member of the Order of Canada. During his career, Butch was a member of 4 Stanley Cup championships. His son, Pierre, was a member of 5 such championships, making them the father-son duo with the most Stanley Cup wins. Incidentally, all were as members of the Montreal Canadiens. Joseph Hector Toe Blake was a Canadian ice hockey player and coach in the National Hockey League. Blake played in the NHL from 1934 to 1951 with the Montreal Maroons and Montreal Canadiens. He led the NHL in scoring in 1939, while also winning the Hart Trophy for Most Valuable Player, and served as captain of the Canadiens from 1940 to his retirement. He won the Stanley Cup 3 times as a player, in 1935 with the Maroons and in 1944 and 1946 with the Canadiens. While with the Canadiens, Blake played on a line with Elmer Latch and Maurice Richard, which was dubbed the Punchline, as all 3 were highly skilled players. In 2017, Blake was named one of the 100 greatest NHL players in history. Blake retired as a player in 1951 and soon after turned to coaching. After several years in lower leagues, he was named the Canadiens' coach in 1955 and would remain in that role until his retirement in 1968. As coach of the Canadiens, he won the Stanley Cup a further 8 times and helped Montreal become one of the most dominant teams in NHL history. Blake played junior and senior hockey in the Sudbury area and was part of the 1932 Memorial Cup champions, the Sudbury Cub Wolves. He played for the Hamilton Tigers of the Ontario Hockey Association during the 1934-1935 season before he signed with the Montreal Maroons of the National Hockey League on February 22, 1935. He made his NHL debut 2 days later on February 24 against the Chicago Blackhawks. Blake played 8 games with the Maroons in the 1934-1935 season, but was held scoreless. He did not play in any of the team's playoff games, but when the Maroons won the Stanley Cup, Blake's name was added to the trophy. Blake then played for the Canadiens until his retirement in 1948. He won the Hart Memorial Trophy as the NHL's most valuable player in 1938-1939. That same year he was also the league scoring champion with 47 points. For the last 8 seasons, he was team captain and led the Canadiens to Stanley Cups in 1944 and 1946. In the latter year, in which he incurred only one minor penalty, he became the first Canadian ever to win the Lady Byng Memorial Trophy for sportsmanship, which only Mats Naslund has replicated since as of 2015 and 1987-1988. He scored the Stanley Cup clinching goal in the 1944 Stanley Cup Finals at over 9 minutes of the first overtime of Game 4, helping the Canadiens complete a 4-game sweep of the Chicago Blackhawks. The following season, the punch line became the second set of line mates ever to finish first, second, and third in NHL scoring in one season. Latch had 80 points, Richard 73, and Blake 67. They followed the Boston Bruins Kraut line of 1939-1940 and would be followed by the Detroit Red Wings production line in 1949-1950. To Blake during a loss to the New York Rangers on January 11, 1951. Blake collided with Rangers skater Bill Jusda, awkwardly hit the boards, and suffered a double fracture of his ankle, ending his NHL career. In 1998, he was ranked number 66 on the Hockey News list of the NHL's 100 greatest players of all time to date. At the time of his retirement from the NHL, Blake was second all-time in career scoring with 527 points, 21 points behind Bill Cowley for the all-time record. He had the all-time record for career points in the playoffs with 62 points in 58 games. Maxwell Herbert Lloyd Bentley was a Canadian ice hockey forward who played for the Chicago Blackhawks, Toronto Maple Leafs, and New York Rangers in the National Hockey League (NHL) as part of a professional and senior career that spanned 20 years. He was the NHL's leading scorer twice in a row and in 1946 won the Hart Trophy as Most Valuable Player. He played in 4 All-Star games and was twice named to a postseason All-Star team. Max Bentley was known for his speed, passing and puck-handling skills. He learned his trade with his brothers as they constantly played street hockey in the summers and on the ice in the winters. Bentley's father flooded a sheet of ice that was the length of a regulation NHL hockey rink but much narrower, forcing the boys to develop the ability to maintain control of the puck while making fast, hard turns to reach the net. He was nicknamed the Dipsy Doodle Dandy from Delisle in reference to his ability to skate around opponents who often found that the only way to stop him was via rough play. Bentley was able to score from nearly any angle, an ability that confounded even his brother Doug. Longtime Prairie hockey promoter Bill Hunter said Bentley was a phenomenal hockey player, an absolute artist with the puck. Opponents occasionally attempted to use Bentley's hypochondria against him, making remarks on how he looked ill in a bid to distract him during the game. Bentley was one of 6 hockey-playing brothers and at one point played with 4 of his brothers with the Drumheller Miners of the Alberta Senior Hockey League. In 1942-1943, he made NHL history when he played on the league's first all-brother line with Doug and Reg. He played 5 seasons in Chicago with Doug before a 1947 trade sent him to the Maple Leafs in one of the most significant transactions in NHL history to that point. Bentley won 3 Stanley Cup championships with the Maple Leafs before spending a final NHL season with the Rangers in 1953-1954. He then returned to his home in Saskatoon to finish his playing career. Considered one of the best players of his era, Bentley was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1966, 2 years after his brother Doug. 1 year later, Max and Doug were inducted together into the Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame. The Hockey News ranked him 48th on its 1998 list of the top 100 players of all time. The Chicago Blackhawks signed Doug Bentley to a contract in the fall of 1939. He had previously been placed on the protected list of the Montreal Canadiens, meaning they were the only NHL team eligible to sign him to a contract. They subsequently dealt his NHL rights to the Boston Bruins for Vic Miles. When he and brother Max went to Boston for a tryout camp, Bruins owner Art Ross declared them among the worst amateurs to come to my camp. However, by the time Chicago signed him, Bentley had established himself as one of the top forwards on the prairies. Bentley appeared in 39 games in his rookie campaign with Chicago, scoring 12 goals and 19 points. His brother Max joined him early in the 1941-42 season, and the pair were placed on a line together. After 2 years of development with the Blackhawks, Bentley emerged as the NHL's scoring leader in 1942-43 with 73 points, a total that tied Cooney Wayland's NHL record for points in a season. He was the first Blackhawks player to finish as the scoring leader and finished second in voting for the Hart Trophy as most valuable player. World War II had decimated the rosters of all NHL teams, and with the Blackhawks searching for players, Max and Doug convinced a team to sign their brother Reg. The trio made history on January 1, 1943, when they became the first all-brother line the NHL had seen. 2 nights later, Max and Doug assisted on Reg's first, and only, NHL goal. It is the only time in league history that a trio of family members recorded the goal and assists on a scoring play. While Max and Doug were established NHL stars, Reg played only 11 games in his NHL career. In 1943-44, Bentley again led the NHL in goal scoring with 38 and was named a first-team All-Star at left wing for the second consecutive season. His career was briefly halted in 1944 when, after playing an exhibition game with Chicago in Canada prior to the 1944-45 season, Canadian officials refused to allow him to return to the United States. He was given permission by military authorities to return to his family farm for the duration of the war and signed on to play with the Laura Beavers of the Saskatchewan Intermediate Hockey League. The Beavers went on to win the Western Canadian Intermediate Championship, defeating a team from Canmore, Alberta to capture the title. Following the war, Bentley returned to the Blackhawks where he was reunited with his brother Max. The brothers and Bill Mosienko formed a line in which each player was small and exceptionally fast. They were dubbed the Pony Line and emerged as one of the top scoring lines in the league. Max led the NHL in scoring with 61 points, while Doug scored 40 points in just 36 games for Chicago. He improved to 55 points in 1946-47 and was named a first-team All-Star for the third time. He played in the first All-Star game on October 13, 1947, for the NHL All-Stars, who defeated the Toronto Maple Leafs 4-3. The Blackhawks, who never iced a strong lineup while Bentley played, made a significant trade early in the 1947-48 season. They sent Max Bentley and a prospect to the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for 5 players. The trade shocked Doug. He thought about retiring following the deal, but felt he could give Chicago at least one more good season. He gave them several good seasons, finished the following 3 seasons with 57, 66 and 52 points respectively, was named to the second All-Star team in 1949, and appeared in 4 more All-Star games in 1948, 1949, 1950 and 1951. Chicago's Herald American newspaper named him the city's top hockey player of the half-century in 1950. Barry was born December 8, 1905 in Quebec City, Quebec. but grew up in Montreal and played amateur hockey for various teams in the city, where he earned the nickname Goal a Game Barry. Both the Montreal Canadiens and Montreal Maroons passed him over, so Barry signed with the New York Americans in 1927. He made his National Hockey League (NHL) debut in 1927-28 and scored 1 goal in 9 games for New York. Barry spent the majority of the season in the Canadian American Hockey League (CANAM) League with the Philadelphia Arrows. He remained in the CANAM League for the 1928-29 season, where he was a member of the New Haven Eagles. Barry led the league in both goals, 19, and points, 29. Barry battled Art Chapman for the scoring title, which he ultimately won on the final day of the season. The Boston Bruins claimed Barry from the Americans in the intra-league draft in May 1929, and from that point he remained in the NHL. He missed only 2 games total in the following 10 seasons. Barry recorded 18 goals and 33 points in 1929-30 for a Bruins team that set an NHL record with 38 wins in a 44-game season. Barry scored 3 playoff goals to help Boston eliminate the Maroons in the semi-final, but Boston was defeated by the Canadiens in the Stanley Cup final. Barry rapidly developed into one of Boston's top offensive threats. He averaged 23 goals per season in his 6 years with the team. The Bruins named him team captain in 1933, led the team in goals for 3 consecutive seasons between 1931 and 1934 with 21, 24 and 27 respectively, and was the team's leading point scorer 3 times between 1932 and 1935. He was also among the league scoring leaders and finished 7th in the NHL with 37 points in 1932-33, 4th with 39 points in 1933-34, and 8th with 40 in 1934-35. A disputed goal by Barry was the flashpoint in the first-ever NHL forfeit on March 14, 1933. Barry scored a controversial overtime goal for Boston in a home game versus the Chicago Blackhawks. At the time, NHL overtime for regular season play consisted of a full 10-minute period. An enraged Chicago coach, Tommy Gorman, punched referee Bill Stewart. Stewart summoned the police to remove Gorman from the visitors' bench. The Blackhawk players refused to continue the game without their coach. The game was forfeited to Boston shortly thereafter. Barry was involved in a major trade prior to the 1935-36 season. The Bruins sent Barry and Art Giroux to the Detroit Red Wings on June 30, 1935, in exchange for Cooney Wayland and Walt Buswell. With Detroit, Barry centered a high-scoring line with Herbie Lewis and Larry Ory as his wings. Barry finished 3rd in the NHL with 21 goals and 2nd with 40 points. In the opening game of the playoffs, Barry played in the longest game in NHL history, a 1-0 victory over the Montreal Maroons that required 6 overtime periods to determine a winner. The Red Wings defeated the Maroons in the playoff semi-final before defeating the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 1936 Stanley Cup final to claim Detroit's first NHL championship. Barry scored a goal in the clinching game, a 3-2 Detroit victory. Barry was a central figure for Detroit as the Red Wings repeated as champions in 1936-37. He finished 3rd in regular season scoring with 44 points, then led all players in goals, assists and points in the playoffs. In the clinching victory over the New York Rangers in the 1937 Stanley Cup final, Barry scored twice including the cup-clinching goal and added an assist in a 3-0 victory. He was named to the NHL's first All-Star team at center and won the Lady Byng Trophy as the league's most gentlemanly player. After a 1937-38 season in which Barry scored only 9 goals, he returned to the NHL leaderboard by finishing 4th with 41 points in 1938-39. The Red Wings spent several months attempting to trade the 34-year-old Barry to the Canadiens. When Montreal feigned a lack of interest, Detroit eventually granted him his outright release and made him a free agent shortly before the 1939-40 season began. 2 days after his release, the Canadiens signed Barry to a contract. His tenure with Montreal was short-lived, however. After scoring only 4 goals and 14 points in 30 games, Montreal released Barry from his contract. He signed on with the Pittsburgh Hornets of the International American Hockey League (IAL) to complete the year. Barry played his final season of professional hockey in 1940-41 in the dual role of player-coach for the Minneapolis Millers of the American Hockey Association (AHA). Barry retired with 195 goals and 387 points in 509 NHL games. He was regarded as one of the league's best playmakers during his career and possessed a good scoring touch in close around the net. Barry was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1965.
Apps played center position with the Toronto Maple Leafs for his entire professional hockey career. His jersey number was 10. He was the winner of the first Calder Memorial Trophy in 1937 and the 1942 Lady Byng Memorial Trophy. Apps served as the Maple Leafs captain during the first National Hockey League All-Star Game on October 13, 1947, at Maple Leaf Gardens. He also played for an All-Star team competing in Montreal on October 29, 1939, to raise money for Babe Siebert's family. Apps was in the prime of his career when he joined the Canadian Army during World War II at the end of the 1943 season. He served 2 years until the war was over, whereupon he returned to captain the Leafs, winning 2 more Stanley Cups in 1947 and 1948.
A description of Frank Boucher must include both his brilliant playmaking as a center and his reputation as one of the most gentlemanly figures ever associated with the NHL. Teamed with Bill and Bun Cook, he formed the dangerous bread line of the New York Rangers and dominated the annual voting for the Lady Byng Trophy between 1928 and 1935. A native of Ottawa, Boucher began playing hockey on the Rideau Canal at the age of 8. He was on his public school team with Aurel Joliat before he joined the intermediate and senior levels of competition. Boucher was claimed by the Boston Bruins. However, before playing a single game in Boston, he was purchased by the New York Rangers at the insistence of his old Western rivals, Bill and Bun Cook, who had experienced Boucher's skills firsthand. Gentleman Frank was inserted between the Cook brothers during the Rangers' inaugural NHL season in 1926-27. The unit exhibited an advanced level of play that surpassed all expectations. The bread line developed into one of the most formidable combinations in NHL history. They were such a perfect fit that New York coach Lester Patrick allowed them to devise plays at one end of the rink while the remainder of the team practiced down at the other. During the decade they played together, Boucher and the Cooks accumulated over 1,100 points. They led the Rangers to their first Stanley Cup in the team's second year of existence in the spring of 1928. Boucher dominated the postseason scoring with 7 goals and 10 points, including both of New York's goals in the Cup-clinching 2-1 triumph over the Montreal Maroons in the final game of the best-of-5 series. 5 seasons later, he contributed 4 points to the Rangers' second Cup victory at the expense of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Boucher retired partway through the 1937-38 season but returned for 15 games in 1943-44 when players enlisted in the Army and the Rangers' roster was depleted. He scored 14 points in 15 games during this brief comeback appearance to bring his career totals to 160 goals and 423 points in 14 regular seasons. Coaching became Boucher's passion as soon as he retired as a player. He guided the New York Rovers to the championship of the Eastern Hockey League in 1938-39 before rejoining the Rangers the following year. Boucher made a triumphant return to the Blueshirts by coaching them to victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 1940 Stanley Cup Final. That same regular season, he pulled goaltender Dave Kerr with 2 minutes left in the game in an attempt to tie the score, initiating a trend that would become exceedingly popular in the coming years. Boucher remained New York's bench boss for the next 10 winters, adding the portfolio of general manager to his responsibilities in 1946-47. He remained coach and general manager until 1948-49 when he co-coached the team with Lynn Patrick before stepping aside to focus strictly on the responsibilities of GM. He stayed on in that capacity until 1954-55, although he helped Muzz Patrick coach the club in 1953-54. While still affiliated with the Rangers, Boucher functioned as chairman of the NHL Rules Committee for 15 years. He worked in tandem with Cecil Duncan of the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association to bring about the introduction of the center red line in 1943-44. This innovation allowed teams to pass the puck out of their own zone and consequently produced a more exciting brand of hockey throughout the league. After leaving the NHL permanently, Boucher returned to amateur hockey to use his administrative expertise. Between 1959 and 1967 he served as commissioner of the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. During the 1966-67 season, he performed the same duties for the Canadian Junior League as well. Frank Boucher was one of the finest all-round players of his time. His gentlemanly conduct on the ice served as a benchmark for many who followed him. On February 9, 1962, Boucher was presented the Sportsmanship Brotherhood's annual award in New York. He was honored posthumously with the Lester Patrick Trophy in 1993 for his immense contributions to the game in the United States. Although Johnny Bower's nickname was the China Wall, it might better have been Perseverance, for although he had a Hall of Fame career in the NHL, it certainly didn't adhere to the traditional notion of what a life in professional hockey should be about. Bower grew up in rural Saskatchewan, the only boy in a family of 9 children. He was dirt poor and never had the proper equipment. He made his goalie pads from an old mattress, made pucks from horse manure. His dad would look for suitably crooked tree branches to shave into sticks. A friend gave him his first pair of skates because his father couldn't afford to buy him a pair, and yet he still refined his game to become one of the best goalies of all time. He began a career in the American Hockey League. Bower played for Providence and Cleveland for 8 full seasons before playing a single NHL game. In 1953-54, he played the entire season for the New York Rangers, but then spent most of the next 4 seasons right back in the minors, having lost the starting job in New York to Gump Worsley. During his 14 years in the minors, he won the Les Cunningham Award as the AHL's best player 3 times and the Hap Holmes Award for top goaltender another 3 times. Bower's big break came in the summer of 1958 when the Toronto Maple Leafs claimed him from Cleveland at the intra-league draft. Bower was reluctant to join the Leafs, even though they had finished in last place the previous season, telling them he could be of no help to the team. It was only after being threatened with suspension that he showed up for training camp that fall, and within days, he had established himself as the team's #1 goalie at age 34. He was to play a total of 12 seasons with the Leafs. Bower, like his other 5 original 6 brethren, became famous for his fearless play. Maskless, he never shied away from an attacking player and in fact patented the most dangerous move a goalie can make, the poke check. Diving head first into the skates of an attacking player at full speed, Bower would routinely flick the puck off that player's stick and out of harm's way. One time, he got a skate in his cheek, knocking a tooth out through his cheek. He suffered innumerable cuts to his mouth and lips and lost virtually every tooth in his mouth from sticks and pucks. But almost to his last game, he never wore a mask. And under the confident eye of coach Punch Imlach, Bower got better and better. He led the Leafs into the playoffs his first season with a miracle comeback ending to the schedule, and then lost 2 finals in a row before winning 3 consecutive Stanley Cup championships, 1962 to 1964. At this time, Bower's career seemed precarious. Imlach noticed that Bower was having trouble with long shots and ordered his keeper to undergo an eye exam. Sure enough, he was short-sighted. But Bower refused to retire and kept right on going, teaming with Terry Sawchuk to win the memorable 1967 Cup with Toronto's over-the-hill gang of players, led by the 43-year-old Bower himself. After he retired in 1970 as the oldest goalie ever to play in the NHL, Bower remained with the Leafs for many years as a scout and then goalie coach, putting the pads on and helping Leaf goalies in practice. At one injury-riddled time during the 1979-1980 season, he came within a whisker, at age 56, of dressing as the team's backup. A member of the Hockey Hall of Fame since 1976, Johnny Bower's number 1 was retired by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2017.
Robert Theodore Bauer was a Canadian professional ice hockey right-winger who played 10 seasons in the National Hockey League (NHL) for the Boston Bruins. He was a member of the famed Kraut line with teammates Milt Schmidt and Woody Dumert. The trio led the Bruins to 2 Stanley Cup championships and became the first line to finish first, second, and third in NHL scoring in 1939-40. Bauer was named to the All-Star team 4 times and was a 3-time winner of the Lady Byng Trophy, awarded for gentlemanly conduct combined with a high caliber of play. He recorded only 36 penalties in minutes in 327 games. Prior to his NHL career, Bauer won the Memorial Cup with the St. Michael's Majors in 1934 as junior champions of Canada. He joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1942 and won the Allen Cup with the Ottawa RCAF Flyers as senior champions that year. Bauer turned to coaching following his NHL career and guided the Kitchener-Waterloo Dutchmen to 2 Allen Cup championships. The Dutchmen were sent to represent Canada at the 1956 Winter Olympics, where Bauer coached the team to a bronze medal. He also coached the Canadian entry at the 1960 Winter Olympics that won a silver medal. Bauer assisted his brother David in creating the Canadian national hockey team in the 1960s, which would become the Olympic Games' top national teams.
Walter "Turk" Broda grew up in Manitoba and was developed as a player in the Detroit minor system, playing with the Olympics in 1935-36. He was discovered by Leafs owner Conn Smythe, who was in Detroit to check out a goalie named Earl Robertson. But when Smythe saw Broda at the other end, he immediately contacted Jack Adams of the Red Wings about acquiring Broda, which he did for just $7,500 cash. Broda joined the Leafs that fall and remained Toronto's goaltender for most of the next 15 years. Turk's outgoing style made him hugely popular with Leafs fans and loved by his teammates. "The Leafs pay me for my work in practices," he joked, "and I throw in the games for free." His first stint with the Leafs lasted until 1943 and included the historic Stanley Cup win of 1942 when the Leafs rebounded from a 3-0 series deficit to beat Detroit in 7 games. In 1943, Broda joined the Army and went off to England for 2 years, primarily to play hockey. When he was discharged in 1945, he went straight to the Gardens and resumed practicing with the team. He was back in goal, and there he stayed for 4 more Stanley Cup finals, 3 in a row from 1947 to 1949 and 1 more in 1951 in which all 5 games went into overtime against Montreal. "I couldn't beat him. Toe Blake couldn't. None of the Canadians could," Maurice Richard said after that series. Broda played the entire season in goal in 8 of his 11 seasons, and part of 2 others, leading the league in shutouts twice. Yet, for all his fame and glory, he's also remembered for his weight problems, which Conn Smythe used as a kind of playful publicity stunt. Smythe ended Broda's run of more than 200 starts in a row when he ordered Broda out of the goal until he got his weight down to 189 pounds. For days afterward, newspaper articles showed the smiling goalie sitting on a scale eating steak or drinking juice for dinner in an effort to lose the weight. Broda joined a fitness club and took up handball to stay lean, and his wife, Betty, became famous for being the one person who could help him lose weight and save the city's team. In practice, Broda was also famous. When the players had to skate laps around the ice, Coach Day would skate directly behind Broda, who was in full equipment, hollering at him to keep up and join the race. When in goal, Broda would face wave after wave of shots. Then Day would take the goalie's stick away and force him to stop another series of pucks using only his arms and legs. He retired after playing only one game in the 1951-52 season. Broda was accorded a special night at the Gardens by Conn Smythe, one of the rarest honors bestowed upon a Leaf. That night came on December 22, 1951, and players and executives from Toronto, the opposing Bruins and every other NHL team gathered to pay respects to one of the greatest goalies of all time. His NHL legacy includes 302 wins, 224 losses and 101 ties in 629 regular season games, including 62 shutouts and a lifetime goals against average of 2.53. He was a three-time NHL All-Star, was twice the recipient of the Vezina Trophy and, most tellingly, backstopped the Maple Leafs to 5 Stanley Cup championships through his career. Following his playing career, Broda turned to coaching, and was behind the bench for the OHA Toronto Marlboros when they won back-to-back Memorial Cup championships in 1955 and 1956. His number 1 jersey has been retired by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Francis King Clancy was a tremendous competitor whose immense contributions on the ice were equaled by his extraordinarily effusive personality off ice during his lifelong association with the game. His consistent effort and rapport with the fans lasted throughout his career as a player, referee, coach, and executive. The Ottawa native first gained local attention by excelling with St. Joseph's High School and the city's Munitions Junior squad. In 1918-19 he began his first of 3 solid years with the senior St. Brigid's squad in Ottawa before signing a pro contract with the NHL Ottawa Senators. Clancy became a regular with the club after the retirement of Eddie Girard, and he quickly established himself as one of the top players in the league. Between 1921-1922 and 1929-30, the affable Irish-Canadian starred on the Sens and was a key component in the club's Stanley Cup triumphs in 1923 and 1927. He hit double figures in goals 3 times and was known for utilizing every trick in the book while defending his own zone. Although he weighed only 155 pounds, the feisty defender took on all comers and even challenged a few unruly fans along the way, losing most fights but never giving an inch or backing down. In 1930, Clancy was the centerpiece of what became known as the best deal in hockey, when he was acquired by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Bud's manager Conn Smythe paid the unprecedented sum of $35,000 and 2 players to acquire the ingredient he felt would put his club over the top as a Stanley Cup contender, a sum he acquired by winning a bet on a racehorse named Rare Jewel. Clancy repaid Smythe's faith in him by constantly bringing the Toronto crowd to its feet with body checks, rushes with the puck, and boundless enthusiasm. The rambunctious defenseman helped the franchise win its first Stanley Cup as the Maple Leafs in 1932 in the team's first year at Maple Leaf Gardens and was voted on to the NHL first and second All-Star teams twice each during his career. He also participated in the Ace Bailey benefit game in 1934 and the Howie Morans Memorial match 3 years later. Early in the 1936-1937 season, Clancy announced his retirement as a player. He coached the Montreal Maroons for the first half of the 1937-1938 seasons before embarking on an 11-year tenure as an NHL referee. Clancy was every bit as colorful in the white official's sweater as he was as a defenseman. In 1953, he stepped behind the Maple Leafs bench and remained there for 3 seasons. Toronto was in decline after the 1951 Stanley Cup win and tragic loss of Bill Barilko in a plane crash that summer. Following a losing season in 1955-56, Clancy moved upstairs to become the Maple Leafs' assistant general manager. In 1958 he received hockey's greatest individual honor when he was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame. Clancy remained in the front office when the team won 4 Stanley Cups in the 1960s and during the succeeding period when the club eventually declined under Harold Ballard's ownership. During the difficult 1970s and 80s, Clancy was one of the bombastic owner's few friends and even took over as an interim coach in 1971-72 when Johnny McClellan was hospitalized with ulcers. The previous year, Clancy was his old fiery self when he screamed at Madison Square Garden fans to return Bernie Parent's mask after it was flipped into the crowd by New York's Vic Hadfield during a heated playoff game. By the mid-80s, Clancy was a goodwill ambassador for the club and his death in 1986 saddened millions. The King Clancy Trophy is awarded annually to a player for his charitable community work. While demonstrating a high level of skill both as a defenseman and as a forward, Aubrey "Dit" Clapper became one of the league's most versatile performers. In a career that lasted 2 decades, he forged a reputation as a tenacious yet honest competitor. He rarely looked for trouble on the ice, but if the game turned rough, he was one of the league's more accomplished pugilists. Throughout his pro tenure, Clapper was a respected leader on the ice and in the dressing room. This quality was an asset after he retired and became a coach in the NHL and the American Hockey League. After a year of seasoning with the Boston Tigers of the Can-Am League, Clapper was sold to the parent club in October 1927, and he'd remain in the Bruins lineup for the next 20 years, becoming the first 20-year man in NHL history. As an experiment, Boston coach Art Ross used Clapper as a right wing, and Clapper adjusted well to his new position. He scored a key goal in the Bruins' first-ever Stanley Cup win in 1928-29, which came at the expense of the New York Rangers in a best-of-3 finals. Eventually, Clapper formed the ever-dangerous Dynamite line with Cooney Weiland and Dutch Gaynor. This unit reached its zenith during the 1929-30 season when it led Boston to an unprecedented 1 May 38 regular season mark. Clapper scored 41 goals in 44 games, second only to Weiland's 43. In 1931 and 1935, Clapper was chosen as the right wing on the NHL's second All-Star team. By the 1937-38 season, the Boston Defense Corps was in need of an overhaul. Meanwhile, the Kraut line of Milt Schmidt, Woody Dumart and Bobby Bauer had taken on the lion's share of the scoring chores. Clapper was therefore moved back to his original position on defense, and the reassignment inspired him to play some of the best hockey of his career. The work of Clapper and Eddie Shore was crucial to Boston's win over the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 1939 Stanley Cup Finals, and between 1939 and 1941 he was named to the NHL First All-Star Team 3 consecutive times. Clapper demonstrated his well-known sportsmanship when he scored his 200th career goal at Maple Leaf Gardens on January 8, 1941. After the game, he presented the stick he used to reach this milestone to Maple Leafs assistant general manager Frank Selk as a token of his admiration. Later that year, Clapper contributed 5 playoff assists as the Bruins won their 3rd Stanley Cup by sweeping Detroit in 4 straight games. During the 1941-42 season, Clapper suffered a severed tendon and it was believed that the injury would end his career. Typically, Clapper's resilience and determination inspired him to return the following year with his customary effective play. After the 1943-44 schedule, Clapper was chosen to the NHL's second All-Star team. In 1945-46, he assumed the role of player-coach and guided the Bruins to a Stanley Cup Finals against the eventual champions, the Montreal Canadiens. The following year, unhappy with his diminishing ability, the 41-year-old retired as a player 6 games into the season. In an emotional ceremony at the Boston Garden on February 12, 1947, Clapper was honored for his multitude of accomplishments and the Bruins retired his number 5 sweater. In all, Clapper was responsible for 228 goals and 474 points in the regular season as well as 13 playoff goals. He was Boston captain from 1932 to 1938 and again from 1939 until his retirement in 1947. He also served as the Bruins coach for 4 seasons and led the team to 78 regular season wins. A member of Canada's Sports Hall of Fame, Clapper was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1947 when the customary waiting period was waived in recognition of his obvious greatness. Born August 4, 1914, in Edmonton, Alberta, Neil "Frosty" Colville played 3 seasons of junior hockey in and around Edmonton before moving into the New York Rangers organization. Early in 1934, he joined the New York Crescents, a Rangers farm team in the Eastern Amateur League, helping them win the league title. He advanced to the Philadelphia Ramblers for the 1935-36 season, and the club not only won the league championship, but Colville was the leading scorer until about 6 weeks from the end of the schedule when he was sidelined by an injury. Colville moved up to the Rangers in 1936 and later centered the "Bread Line," consisting of brother Mac and Alex Shabitsky. Neil was both a prominent NHL playmaker and scorer until joining the war in 1942. From 1942 to 1945, Neil served with the Canadian Armed Forces, stationed in Ottawa where he captained the 1942-43 Allen Cup-winning Ottawa Commandos. Upon returning to the NHL near the end of the 1944-45 season, he and his brother, both a step slower, took their place on the blue line, the first ever brother combination to do so. Neil's conversion to defense was seamless, and he became the first player to be named to All-Star teams both as a forward and defenseman. He retired in 1949 and became coach of the Rangers a year later after serving New Haven in that capacity in the interim. At 36, he was the league's youngest bench boss, but he held the position for just a year and a half. Ulcers had forced him to adopt a strictly milk diet and he had half his stomach removed. At 61, he married for the first time and settled in Vancouver. He was named to the selection committee of the Hockey Hall of Fame, himself an inductee in 1967, but in 1984 he lost a leg to cancer and stepped down. He passed away 3 years later. In his time, Charlie, the Big Bomber, Conacher had the hardest shot in hockey, a notorious blast that eluded goaltenders and dented rink boards. As a member of one of the most dangerous lines in hockey history, the Toronto Maple Leafs kid line of the 1930s, right-wing Conacher and left-wing Harvey Busher Jackson were the beneficiaries of center Joe Primeau's slick passes as the threesome found itself near the top of the scoring lists for the better part of a decade. Charlie Conacher came from a family of 10 siblings, many of whom were also gifted athletes. Few would dispute that Charlie was the best hockey-playing Conacher, although older brother Lionel and younger brother Roy are also Hall of Famers. Conacher played a year of junior hockey with North Toronto before joining the Toronto Marlboros in 1927. He and Busher Jackson were members of the Marlies Memorial Cup winning team in 1929. And together they made the jump to the Maple Leafs in 1929-1930. There they were teamed with Joe Primeau, who had been a Leafs farmhand to that point, and because of their youth and inexperience, the three were called the Kid Line. With his line-mates' help, Conacher became the best right wing in the game over the next half-decade. He was a daring and explosive scorer who used his size 6 feet 1 inch and 200 pounds in his heyday, to his advantage. He could beat goalies equally well with his booming shot or with a deft move from close range. Once he got moving, he was famous for bowling over anyone between him and the net, and then often the net itself as he crossed the goal line just a few seconds after the puck. 5 times between 1930 and 1936, Conacher either led or tied for the league lead in goal scoring. He was a second-team All-Star in his second and third years in the league and a first-team selection for 3 consecutive seasons beginning in 1933-34. He also helped the Leafs win the Stanley Cup in 1932. Conacher's style of play, which featured all-out attacks, didn't lend itself to a long career and injuries began to wear the big man down. After 9 years with Toronto, he was sold to the Detroit Red Wings, where he played for 1 year before moving to the New York Americans for 2 seasons. He retired from play in 1941 but stayed in the game as a coach, guiding the Oshawa Generals to a Memorial Cup championship in 1944 before tutoring younger brother Roy and the rest of the Chicago Blackhawks for 3 years in the late 1940s. Charlie Conacher inspired a generation of Leaf players with his hard work and determination. The one battle he couldn't win was with cancer. He died in 1968 after a year-long fight with throat cancer, but in typical Conacher fashion, his legacy has helped in the search for a cure to the disease that claimed him. The Charlie Conacher Research Fund has raised millions for cancer research. Between 1968 and 1984, the Charlie Conacher Memorial Award, a non-NHL trophy, was awarded to the NHL player best exhibiting outstanding humanitarian and public service contributions. Named Canada's top male athlete of the half-century in 1950, Lionel Conacher excelled in virtually every sport he took part in. Aptly named the Big Train, the 6-foot, 195-pound Conacher was a proficient NHL skater. He normally played left defense and was best known for his imposing physical presence, leadership skills and rock-solid play in his own zone. The Toronto native didn't start skating until he was 16 years old, but he made up for lost time, refining his game with the Toronto Century Rovers and the Oralee Athletic Club before joining the Toronto Canoe Club Juniors in 1919-20. The Paddlers captured both the OHA Junior Crown and the Memorial Cup later that season. Following this junior success, Conacher returned to the Oralees to play for their senior team for 2 years. In 1920 he also hit the game-winning home run to give his team the Toronto Semi-Pro Baseball crown, then promptly took a taxi across the city and scored 4 goals for his lacrosse team, which was losing 3-0 when he arrived. In 1921 he scored 2 touchdowns to lead the Toronto Argonauts to victory in the Grey Cup game. In 1922-23, Conacher played hockey for the North Toronto Seniors and he was on hand when they played Midland on February 8, 1923, in the first match ever broadcast on radio. At this stage, Conacher was so highly regarded that the Toronto Street Pats and Montreal Canadiens both invited him to play in the NHL. Although he declined to sign with either of these teams, it was to be only a matter of time before he made his big league debut. He maintained his amateur status long enough to accept an athletic scholarship offered from Bellefonte Academy in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Conacher then captained the Pittsburgh Yellow Jackets in 1924 and 1925 as they won consecutive United States Amateur Hockey Association titles. In 1925-26, the Big Train finally made his professional hockey debut. He was instrumental in keeping most of the Yellow Jackets together when the team renamed itself the Pirates and was admitted to the NHL as an expansion squad. The burly rearguard captained the team and scored the first goal in franchise history, against the Boston Bruins on November 26, 1925. A year later he was traded to the New York Americans, where he played 4 seasons and helped Leo Reese and Bill Bridge anchor the club's defense corps. Conacher functioned as the Amerks player coach in 1929-30, then joined the Montreal Maroons the next season. He enjoyed 3 excellent years there, including a career-best 28 points in 1932-33. The Chicago Blackhawks obtained his services in time for the 1933-34 schedule, and Conacher was a key figure in the club's first-ever Stanley Cup victory that season. His impact was such that he finished second to the Canadiens' Aurel Joliat in the voting for the Hart Trophy and earned a spot on the NHL first All-Star team. After 1 year in Chicago, Conacher returned to the Maroons, where he'd spend his last 3 NHL seasons and take part in a second Cup triumph in 1935. He brought his distinguished career to a close after the Maroons were eliminated from the playoffs by the New York Rangers on April 23, 1937. Rather than risk becoming a fading star, he went out on a high note. He was runner-up to Babe Siebert in the 1937 Hart Trophy voting and was placed on the NHL's second All-Star team. The Big Train was elected to the Ontario legislature in 1937 and to Parliament 12 years later. He served as an MP until his death on May 26, 1954. Fittingly, he was playing in a charity softball match and collapsed while running the bases after a hit. Conacher was a charter member of the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame in 1955, the Canadian Football Hall of Fame and Museum in 1963 and the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame and Museum in 1966. In 1994 he was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame. Roy Conacher was the younger brother of two of the most celebrated athletes of their time. Charlie Conacher was the Big Bomber, a strong man with a booming shot who played on the Toronto Maple Leafs kid line in the 1930s. Lionel Conacher was the Big Train, a legendary all-around star who was named Canada's Athlete of the Half-Century in 1950. Both older Conachers were honored with plaques in the Hockey Hall of Fame soon after the end of their distinguished National Hockey League careers. But Roy, quiet and modest about his talents, may have been the most naturally gifted hockey player in the family. He began skating earlier than his brothers and was therefore much smoother on the ice. He combined speed with strength and was a resourceful goal scorer. But his career was interrupted by his service in the Royal Canadian Air Force during World War II, preventing him from playing in his prime and perhaps establishing himself as the third Conacher superstar in professional hockey. Roy and his twin brother, Bert, were born on October 5, 1916, in Toronto, the youngest of 10 Conacher children. In his youth, Roy played hockey for Toronto area teams, leading the Marlborough Juniors to titles across the province at the bantam and midget levels. In 1933-1934, he joined the West Toronto Nationals and played for 3 seasons in the Ontario Hockey Association. In his final year he led the league in scoring and was the star of the Nationals when they won the Memorial Cup in 1935-36. At the age of 22, he was put on the Beantown roster, playing on the left wing alongside center Bill Cowley, a future Hall of Famer whose style meshed perfectly with the talented Conacher's goal-scoring touch and ability to anticipate plays. Conacher led the league with 26 goals in 47 games in his first season, the first rookie to ever accomplish the feat, a record that wasn't broken until Teemu Selanne came along more than 50 years later. The Bruins made a fabulous run through the playoffs, with Conacher scoring 6 times, including the goal that won Boston the Stanley Cup in the finals against the Toronto Maple Leafs in 1939. Conacher finished second to teammate Frank Brimsick in Calder Trophy voting for Rookie of the Year honors. In his first 4 seasons, Conacher was among the league's top 10 scorers each year. He barely made it in 1939-40 after he broke his wrist and missed 16 games. The next season he paced Cowley to the scoring championship and scored 24 goals himself. Except for his last year with the team, 1941-1942, the Bruins finished first in the regular season each year he played. At one point Boston had a streak of 23 undefeated games, including 15 road games without a loss. The Bruins had little trouble with Detroit in the finals, sweeping the Red Wings to earn Conacher his second Stanley Cup win. Conacher's promising career was put on hold when he volunteered for the RCAF and was stationed in Western Canada and abroad during the war. He was given an honorable discharge following the war, but when he returned home, his boss with the Bruins, Art Ross, was doubtful he could regain his scoring touch after so long an absence from competitive hockey. Roy played only 4 games with Boston before Ross traded him to Detroit at the beginning of the 1946-47 season. Conacher, with all that natural talent easing his transition from his military break, led the Red Wings in scoring in his first season with the team with 30 goals and 54 points, good for 7th in the league. In one game, he helped line mate Billy Taylor set the assists record when he scored 3 goals in the opening period and another in the second, all of them assisted by Taylor, who finished the game with 7 assists. Conacher's stay in Detroit was cut short by an argument with GM Jack Adams about his pay for the upcoming season. Conacher was at first traded to the New York Rangers, but he refused to report and announced his retirement. 2 weeks later the trade was voided and he was signed instead by the Chicago Blackhawks. Midway through his first season he was joined in Chicago by his brother Charlie, who was named the team's coach. Charlie placed Roy on a line with Bill Masienko and Doug Bentley, replacing the departed Snuffy Smith, who had set scoring records with the talented playmakers. Conacher responded with the best season of his career in 1948-1949, winning the Art Ross Trophy, ironic given that it was Ross who had doubted him a few seasons before, as the NHL's leading points getter with 68. He was placed on the league's first All-Star team and played in the All-Star Game, significant accomplishments in the post-war era, when the league was once again a stomping ground only for hockey's best. The Blackhawks were a weak team and Charlie was eventually let go. Roy retired 3 or 4 times himself, and though he led the team in scoring several more times, he finally retired for good from the game in 1952. Just 12 games into the 1952-1953 season. Like most young men of his day, the Ottawa fireman, Connell excelled at many sports. He was a catcher in the Interprovincial League, baseball, played lacrosse for the Eastern Canadian champion Ottawa team in the 1920s, and played football with St. Brigid's of the Ottawa City League. Amazingly, this future Hockey Hall of Famer entered hockey almost by accident. With no prior experience to his credit, he was talked into playing the game while stationed at Kingston during World War I. Since he could not skate, he had no option but to be the team's goaltender. Connell proved to be a quick study and joined the Kingston Frontenac Juniors of the Ontario Hockey Association in 1917 before moving to the Ottawa City League in 1919. It was there that he played alongside future Hall of Famer King Clancy while with Ottawa Street Brigids in 1920-21. Noted for wearing a small black cap when he played, Connell turned pro with the Ottawa Senators for 1924-25 and backstopped Ottawa to the Stanley Cup in 1926-27. The following season saw him establish the National Hockey League record for longest shutout sequence of 461 hours and 29 seconds by recording 6 consecutive shutouts, from January 31 to February 18, 1928. His record stands to this day and may never be broken. Connell initially retired from hockey in 1933 but returned for 1 game during the 1933-34 season as a substitute goaltender for the New York Americans after an injury to Roy Waters forced Shrimp out of the game. Connell followed up by returning to the game full-time and won his second Stanley Cup as a member of the Montreal Maroons in 1935. Maroons manager and coach, Tommy Gorman, called Connell's performance in the 1935 playoffs the greatest goalkeeping performance in the history of hockey. He then provided some specifics. It was in the Stanley Cup playoffs when the Maroons were 2 men short. For 3 minutes, Connell put on an astounding effort against the Leafs, and the Maroons went on to win the Cup. The Maroons, who were underdogs in the best-of-5 series, won in 3 straight games. Connell again announced his retirement and did not play in the 1935-36 season but returned to active duty with the English Montrealers for 27 games the following year before retiring for good. William Osser Cook was considered by many to be the greatest right-winger ever to play the game. He was a remarkably gifted and rugged competitor who served as the catalyst on the New York Rangers' famous breadline with his brother Bun and Frank Boucher. Cook's input was crucial to the Rangers' first two Stanley Cup triumphs in 1928 and 1933. Born in Brantford, Ontario, Cook grew up farther east, in the Kingston area. He learned to skate on the nearby Rideau Canal and made his junior hockey debut with the Kingston Frontenacs in 1916. His play impressed the local fans, who compared him with the legendary Scotty Davidson. In preparing for their initial NHL season in 1926, the New York Rangers signed Cook from the defunct WHL. In addition to being the first skater signed officially by the club, he became the team's first captain and the foundation on which the club was built. Fittingly, he scored the first goal in franchise history on November 16, 1926, when the Broadway Blueshirts shut down the Montreal Maroons 1-0 to begin their NHL life in style. In these early days of the franchise, Cook was joined by his younger brother Bun and center Frank Boucher to form one of hockey's most successful forward combinations. This trio dominated opposing defenses for several years with their precision passing and relentless effort. The elder Cook led all scorers in 1926-27 with 37 points and was runner-up in the Hart Trophy voting. The breadline led the Rangers to their first Stanley Cup triumph in 1928 by accounting for every one of the team's goals in a thrilling 5-game final series with the Montreal Maroons. New York reached the finals again the following season, but they came up short against the Boston Bruins, who won their inaugural championship in a 2-game sweep in the best-of-3 finals. Cook and his linemates played well despite their loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 1932 Stanley Cup Finals. They were in top form the next year, with Cook leading the way with his second scoring title. Once again he finished runner-up in the Hart Trophy selection, this time to Bruins star defenseman Eddie Shore. And the Rangers exacted their revenge on the Maple Leafs by capturing their second Stanley Cup by 3-1 in the best-of-5 finals. To cap an extraordinary year, Cook scored the dramatic first-ever NHL Stanley Cup winning overtime goal. The original Ranger continued to register impressive numbers for New York until his retirement in 1936-37. On top of his 2 scoring championships, Cook was selected as the right wing on the NHL First All-Star Team 3 times and the second team once. His 229 regular season goals accounted for nearly 1/5 of the Rangers' total during the club's first decade of play. A successful tenure as coach awaited Cook after he retired as a player. He guided the AHL's Cleveland Barons to the 1939 and 1941 Calder Cup championships during his 6 years at the helm that began in 1937-38. In 1950 he coached the Minneapolis Millers to the Paul W. Loudon Trophy in the United States Hockey League. He also coached the Denver Falcons of the same league the following season before returning to Saskatoon. He was coaching the Saskatoon Quakers of the Pacific Coast Hockey League in 1951-52 when the New York Rangers turned to him to help revitalize their sagging fortunes. Cook couldn't refuse, since the appeal came from the general manager of the Blueshirts, his old line-mate Frank Boucher. Cook spent just under 2 seasons coaching his old club before permanently retiring from the game at the conclusion of the 1952-53 season. His immense contribution to the New York franchise didn't go unnoticed. On January 10, 1986, just 3 months before he passed away, the New York Rangers presented him with their Alumni Association Award before a cheering crowd at Madison Square Garden. Cook is a member of Canada's Sports Hall of Fame and was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1952. Fred "Bun" Cook was a popular left wing who compiled 302 points during an 11-year NHL career spent chiefly with the New York Rangers. He and brother Bill lined up on either side of center Frank Boucher to form the bread line, one of the most revered forward units in NHL history. Recognized as an innovator, Bun Cook has been credited with introducing and perfecting the drop pass. A native of Kingston, Ontario, Cook first acquired a passion for the game between 1917 and 1920 when he played on the St. Mary's, Regiopolis and Kingston junior clubs, followed by a stint with the Guelph Agricultural Club. In 1922–1923, he joined the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds of the Northern Ontario League, where he contributed to an Allen Cup championship the following season. Cook made his professional debut in 1924–1925 with the Saskatoon Crescents of the Western Canada Hockey League. In 1926, the Cook brothers were an integral part of the eastward move of talented players to the expansion New York Rangers. In 1927–1928, teamed with Boucher, the Cooks were a key factor in the Rangers' first Stanley Cup championship. Bun was less dangerous around the net than Bill, but he was no less determined, and his work ethic and ability to carve out a niche of his own despite being the brother of a hockey legend earned him respect throughout the league. He was a fan favorite at Madison Square Garden because of his dedication, and he did manage to finish among the league's top 10 scorers on 3 occasions. Cook registered a personal high of 24 goals in 1929–30 and was selected to the NHL's second All-Star team the next season. The 1932–33 campaign brought the Rangers their second Stanley Cup as the irrepressible breadline led the way. During the mid-1930s, the Cook brothers, along with fellow veterans Frank Boucher, Murray Murdoch and Ching Johnson, served as Lester Patrick's Players Committee, the accepted team leaders who quelled a brewing controversy that had arisen in the dressing room when Patrick played his son Lynn on a regular basis. The dissent proved unjustified, as the junior Patrick was a useful young player on a team laden with veterans. In 1935–36, Cook was forced to the sidelines as a result of an arthritic condition. Prior to the 1936–37 season, he was acquired by the Boston Bruins, with whom he played his final year. During his 11 years of NHL service, Cook was responsible for 158 goals and 302 points. During the postseason, he accumulated an additional 15 goals and 18 points for the Blue Shirts. After his playing career, Cook turned to coaching. As a rookie bench boss in 1937–38, he led the Providence Reds to the American Hockey League's Calder Cup championship, a feat he duplicated in 1939–40. In 1943–44, Cook moved behind the bench of the Cleveland Barons of the same league and guided that team to an incredible 5 Calder Cup triumphs before he retired from minor pro hockey in 1956. Cook went down in history as one of the most popular and successful coaches in all history. Defenseman Art Coulter played nearly 500 NHL games for the Chicago Blackhawks and New York Rangers during an exemplary career. An athlete of exceptional strength and endurance, he was fiercely devoted to the concept of teamwork. The native of Winnipeg, Manitoba began making a name for himself in his hometown with the Senior Pilgrims. He gained 2.5 years of professional experience with the Philadelphia Arrows of the Can-Am League. He excelled at both ends of the ice and demonstrated a willingness to mix it up with the opposition by leading the league in penalty minutes in 1930–31. After playing the last 13 games of the regular season and 2 playoff matches for Chicago in 1931–32, Coulter became a regular the next year. His physical play and ability to handle the puck made Coulter a perfect defense partner for burly Taffy Abel. The solid duo played a key role on the Hawks' inaugural Stanley Cup win in 1934. Coulter was placed on the NHL's second All-Star team in 1935 but found himself traded to the Rangers for Earl Seibert midway through the next season. His solid defensive play and competitive zeal pleased the New York management and fans. Prior to the 1937-38 season, Coulter succeeded Bill Cook as captain and was selected to the second All-Star team 3 straight years beginning in 1938. In 1939 he took part in the Babe Siebert Memorial Game, and the next year he helped the Rangers win their third Stanley Cup. Coulter set a career high with 19 points the following season and was one of the most popular players on Manhattan. The veteran defender joined the Canadian Armed Forces during World War II and spent 2 seasons with the Coast Guard Clippers when they played out of the Eastern League. Coulter was one of the top attractions in the league and was placed on the first All-Star team in 1943. He was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1974. Bill "Cowboy" Cowley was one of the top playmaking forwards in NHL history. 3 times in his 13-year career he led the NHL in assists. He always seemed to know where his linemates were positioned. An unselfish player who always aimed to set up a colleague for a goal before taking a shot himself, and he rarely jeopardized his team's fortunes by taking a penalty. Because of his ability to see the whole ice, he was arguably the Wayne Gretzky of his era. He first drew attention to himself with his exemplary play with the Primrose and Shamrocks clubs in the Ottawa City Junior League from 1930 to 1932. He then graduated to the Shamrocks senior team in 1932-33, and he proved he could handle the tougher competition. Cowley first put up big numbers with the Halifax Wolverines of the Maritime Senior Hockey League in 1933-34. Dominating the scoring race with 25 goals and 50 points in 38 games. In 1934-35 he embarked on an NHL career with the St. Louis Eagles, who had just relocated from Ottawa. Cowley is the only Hall of Fame player to have begun his career with this club. When the team folded prior to the next season, Cowley was claimed by the Boston Bruins in a dispersal draft. The Bruins, a team stacked with experienced forwards, originally used him as a left winger, but his swift skating and precise passes forced them to move him to center. Cowley broke through in 1937-38 with 39 points and selection to the NHL first All-Star team. The following season, he recorded a league-high 34 assists. His passing and puck-handling wizardry helped the powerful Bruins squad win the second Stanley Cup in franchise history that year. He formed a lethal combination with Mel "Sudden Death" Hill, who scored an NHL record 3 overtime game winners in the semifinals against the Rangers. Each tally was the result of Cowley's playmaking artistry. 2 years later in 1940-41, Cowley won the NHL scoring championship and helped the Bruins win their second cup in 3 years. For a short time he formed the revered three-gun line with Roy Conacher and Eddie Wiseman. Cowboy Cowley again topped the NHL in assists in 1940-41 and 1942-43, registering 45 in each year. His 1941 output, recorded during a 48-game schedule, represented a new league standard. After each of these seasons Cowley was awarded the Hart Trophy and placed on the NHL first All-Star team. He earned another first-team selection, the 4th of his career, in 1944 after scoring a career-high 30 goals, despite missing 12 games with an injury. Before the injury Cowley held a comfortable lead in the points race, and although he ended up in 7th place, Herbie Kane won the title with 82 points. His total of 71 points in 36 games hints strongly at what might have been. Cowley played with the Bruins until the end of the 1946-47 season, and on February 12 of that season he surpassed Sid Howe as the NHL's career point leader. This mark stood for 5 years until Elmer Latch overtook him. Along the way, Cowley recorded at least 30 assists on 5 occasions. In 549 regular season matches he accumulated 548 points and was one of the game's most reliable producers. Clarence Day's perpetually cheery demeanor earned him the nickname, Happy, which was later shortened to Hap. Day was born in Owen Sound, Ontario, and he played his minor hockey there. He routinely walked 5 miles, carrying his equipment, to games in the closest big town, Port McNicoll, and later in life he maintained his penchant for walking. During his teens he ended up in Hamilton, where he played senior hockey with the Tigers. He also enrolled at the University of Toronto, where he majored in pharmacy and played for the varsity team. By this time he was considered one of the finest amateurs in the country and one of the best skaters outside the NHL. On December 10, 1924, Day made his NHL debut as a left wing, and his linemates were none other than future Hall of Famers Jack Adams and Babe Dye. After his rookie year, he shifted to defense, where he spent the rest of his career. During his playing days, Day also ran a drugstore in Maple Leaf Gardens. Eventually he gave up this business and Dick Dowling's Grill took its place. Day sustained numerous minor injuries during his career, but the most serious was a torn Achilles heel he suffered on February 2, 1928, when another player stepped on the back of his leg. He tried to return to action, but the injury triggered an onslaught of further maladies that cost him the rest of the season. Over time the heel recovered fully and he'd miss very few games over the next decade. Day was a born leader, and when the Leafs' captaincy became available, there was no doubt as to who would lead the team. He was team captain from 1926 until 1936. Starting in 1931, he was paired on defense with King Clancy. Together they formed one of the best twosomes in the league. In the spring of 1932, the Leafs christened their new home, Maple Leaf Gardens, with the team's first Stanley Cup championship under Conn Smythe's management, and Day scored a key goal. In a 2-game, total goals semifinal against the Montreal Maroons, the teams tied the first leg 1-1. In the second game, Day made a spectacular rush, something defense players rarely did then, to tie the score and send the game into overtime. Bob Gracie got the winner for the Leafs and they moved on to the finals against the New York Rangers. Day scored 3 goals in the first 2 games and the Leafs won the famous tennis series by scores of 6-4, 6-2 and 6-4. Day played his final season with the New York Americans in 1937-38. Then acted as a referee for 2 years while coaching in the Toronto area. He won the coveted Memorial Cup with the West Toronto Juniors in 1936, and the next season he coached the Toronto Dominions to the OHA senior title before losing to the eventual Allen Cup winners, the Sudbury Tigers, in the provincial championships. Fortune smiled on Day in 1940 when Leafs coach Dick Irvin packed up and moved to Montreal to coach the Canadiens. Leafs owner Conn Smythe immediately hired Day as Irvin's replacement, and over the next 10 years he was the most successful coach in the NHL. In his first year the Leafs made it to the semifinals before losing to Boston in 7 games. But in 1942 he coached the team to the greatest Stanley Cup comeback of all time. The Leafs lost the first 3 games of the finals to Detroit but stormed back to win 4 in a row and claim the Stanley Cup. Day was a taskmaster who demanded the most from his men. Much to the dismay of some on-ice officials, he knew the rule book inside out and could quote it verbatim. In all, he won 5 cup championships as coach of the Leafs, in 1942 and 1945, then 3 in a row from 1947 to 1949, the first time in NHL history that a Stanley Cup hat trick was accomplished. After he gave up coaching in 1950, the Leafs immediately appointed Day assistant to general manager Conn Smythe, although Day in fact had the responsibility of running the team until 1957. He picked up another Stanley Cup with coach Joe Primeau in 1951, and was appointed general manager for 1957-58. Gord Drillin had a short but spectacular career in the National Hockey League, playing mainly with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was a first-team All-Star in 1938 and 1939, a second-team All-Star in 1942, an NHL scoring leader and Lady Byng Trophy winner in 1938. He played in the 1939 Babe Siebert Memorial Game and won a Stanley Cup with Toronto in 1941-42 when the Leafs made their legendary comeback against Detroit. Toronto was down 3-0 in that best-of-7 final and Drillin was benched after the third game. The Leafs went on to win 4 games in a row to capture the Stanley Cup, the first and only time a team has rallied from 3-0 down to win the Cup. Although newspapermen and reporters wrote that he was bitter about being benched, Drillin told a different story. "I don't mind talking about it," he said. "Hap Day just told me that my style of hockey was not the same as the rest of the team, and we needed this to beat Detroit. And he was right. I was going bad at the time, no doubt about it." Drillin's style of hockey was to park himself in front of the net and tip shots and swat at rebounds, and not worry about back-checking. "I spent 10 years playing in the slot before anyone invented a name for it," he said later. Hall of Fame goaltender and teammate Turk Broda knew of Drillin's goal-scoring abilities firsthand during Leaf practices. "I don't think there's a player in hockey who can shoot the puck more accurately," Broda once said. "Even if you leave him an opening the size of the puck, he'll hit it every time." Accurate or not, the Leafs had had enough of Drillin's one-way style and sold him to Montreal prior to the 1942-43 season for $30,000. After one season with Montreal in which he scored at a point-per-game pace, Drillin, at age 29, joined the war effort. He had played his last game in the NHL. He played some hockey while in the service and returned to Eastern Canada after the war to play senior hockey. His playing days gave way to coaching and, in turn, to scouting. He was welcomed back into the Maple Leaf family as their maritime scout in the late 1960s, and recommended Errol Thompson to the Leafs brass. Sidney "Sid" Abel, born in Melville, Saskatchewan, Old Bootnose, as he was known, Abel joined the Red Wings in 1938 after playing junior hockey with the Flin Flon Bombers. He split the next 2 seasons between Detroit and their affiliates in the International American Hockey League before becoming a full-time player in 1940. Abel was named captain of the Red Wings in 1942. In 1943, Abel left the Red Wings to serve with the Royal Canadian Air Force during World War II. During this time he skated with the RCAF team in Montreal. Abel was demobilized late in the 1946 season, regaining his team captaincy, just in time for the playoffs. In 1947, Abel and Ted Lindsay were teamed up with rookie right-winger Gordie Howe as a forward line by Red Wings coach Jack Adams. While Abel's effectiveness late that season and in the playoffs was limited by an injury, the line paid immediate dividends, turning Lindsay into a star and leading the team to a playoff berth. 3. The following season, Lindsay, Abel and Howe finished 1-3-4 in team scoring, while leading the Red Wings to the Stanley Cup Finals. Abel was a member of 3 Stanley Cup winning teams in 1943, 1950, and 1952. Sid Abel in 1998. He was ranked number 85 on the Hockey News list of the 100 greatest hockey players. An outstanding defensive left winger with an above-average scoring touch, Woodrow "Woody" Dumart played nearly 800 regular season games for the Boston Bruins between 1935 and 1954. He was best known for his achievements with Milt Schmidt and Bobby Bauer on the feared Kraut line. His leadership and high standard of play made Dumart a fan favorite and helped the Bruins win the Stanley Cup twice. The young winger made an impression during his first full season in the NHL in 1937-38 when he was paired with his old friends Schmidt and Dick Clapper. He proved to be a determined competitor who relished the chance to perform a checking role. Dumart also chipped in with a respectable 27 points in 48 games that year. Dumart gained valuable experience with the Boston Cubs of the Can-Am League in 1935-36 and earned a one-game call-up to the NHL. The next year he appeared in 17 games for the Bruins, but his development wasn't rushed. Dumart played two-thirds of the year with the Providence Reds of the AHL in an effort to polish his game. It was here that he was first paired with Schmidt and Bauer on an effective forward unit. Providence coach Albert "Battleship" Leduc originally labeled them the Sauerkraut line, in reference to their German ancestry. By the 1938-39 season, the Kraut line was working wonders in the NHL. Their offensive proficiency and competitive spirit were crucial to the Bruins' second Stanley Cup win in franchise history in 1939. Dumart continued to check the top right wingers in the game and also recorded his first 20-goal season in 1939-40. The following season he helped Boston win its second Stanley Cup title in 3 years. Dumart's stellar contribution didn't go unnoticed. Following both the 1939-40 and 1940-41 seasons, he was voted to the NHL's second All-Star team. Late in the 1941-42 season, Dumart and his linemates joined the Canadian effort in World War II. That spring they played on the Ottawa RCAF and helped the unit win the Allen Cup, the top senior amateur title in Canada at that time. In 1944 and 1945 Dumart served overseas. After the war, he returned to the league and enjoyed some of his finest seasons, statistically. He recorded 4 20-goal seasons between 1946 and 1951 and took part in the first 2 annual NHL All-Star Games in 1947 and 1948. The veteran was placed on the second All-Star team for the third time in his career after the 1946-47 season. Dumart left the Bruins after their elimination at the hands of the Montreal Canadiens in the 1954 semifinals. In the following year, he played 15 games for the Providence Reds of the AHL before retiring. Over the years he accumulated 211 goals and 429 points while becoming one of the most respected and popular Bruin of his era. Bill Durnan entered the professional game late and didn't stay for long, but he packed an entire career's worth of awards and recognition into his 7 National Hockey League seasons with the Montreal Canadiens. He won the Vezina Trophy as the league's top netminder an amazing 6 times, missing out on the award only once when Toronto's Turk Broda borrowed it in 1948. Up to that point, Durnan had earned at most $15 per week between playing hockey, softball and doing a variety of odd jobs. The Canadiens' manager Tommy Gorman was known to drive a hard bargain when it came to negotiating contracts with his players. At the Habs training camp in 1943, he settled on Durnan as his goalie, but the amateur didn't make it easy on the general manager. Durnan proved to be a tough negotiator, saying he was happy as an amateur and happy with less money if it meant avoiding the stress of the professional game. On opening night, the goalie still wasn't signed. A mere 10 minutes before the first face-off, he spoke with Gorman and the Montreal skipper finally mumbled the figures Durnan was waiting to hear. He signed his name to the contract and ran down the hall to dress for the game. The ink was hardly dry on the signature when he finished his debut, a 2-2 draw with the Boston Bruins. Incredibly, The rookie netminder was a few months shy of his 29th birthday. That first season the Canadiens had the offensive services of the Punchline, Elmer Latch, Rocket Richard and Toe Blake, but it was the often spectacular play of Durnan that took Montreal back to the Stanley Cup after 13 years of frustration. He led the league in games played, wins and goals against average in the regular season and in the playoffs, when he allowed only 1.53 goals per game as the Canadiens skated to the title. Durnan was awarded the Vezina Trophy, the first rookie to win the award, and was selected to the league's first All-Star team. It's hard to imagine a better four-year introduction to the NHL than Durnan's. He won the Vezina Trophy for the 4 consecutive seasons and cemented himself on the first All-Star team. Montreal won the Stanley Cup again in 1946 and finished first in the league after the regular season each year. Durnan suffered his only losing season in 1947-48. For the first and only time, he didn't lead the league in goals against average and Montreal missed the playoffs. Broda, with the powerhouse Maple Leafs, took Durnan's spot on the first All-Star team and had his name engraved on the Vezina Trophy as well as the Stanley Cup. Durnan returned to his winning ways in 1948-49, setting a modern league record with a shutout streak that lasted over 309 minutes and 4 games. In the next 2 seasons he was once again the best goalie in the league. Durnan was an easygoing man, friendly and calm, but over time the stress of playing, and the mental and physical toll of so many minutes and games between the posts, began to wear him down. In 1950 he abruptly retired from the game at the age of 35, while still in his prime. Chuck Gardiner, born on December 31, 1904, was a legendary figure in the early years of the National Hockey League. Known for his remarkable skills as a goaltender, Gardiner's contributions to the sport of ice hockey earned him a well-deserved spot in the NHL Hall of Fame. Chuck Gardiner's hockey journey began in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, where he honed his skills on the ice. He made his NHL debut with the Chicago Blackhawks during the 1927-1928 season. Gardiner quickly established himself as one of the premier goaltenders in the league. Gardiner played his entire NHL career with the Chicago Blackhawks, serving as the team's stalwart goaltender. His career in the NHL spanned from 1927 to 1934. Gardiner's tenure with the Blackhawks coincided with a period of significant growth and development for the franchise. Chuck Gardiner's reputation as an elite goaltender was well-deserved. He was known for his quick reflexes, exceptional positioning, and cool under pressure. His remarkable statistics reflect his dominance in the net. Gardiner played a pivotal role in leading the Chicago Blackhawks to their first Stanley Cup championship in franchise history in 1934. His performance in the playoffs was nothing short of exceptional, solidifying his status as one of the all-time greats. Gardiner was awarded the Vezina Trophy, which recognizes the NHL's top goaltender, in 2 consecutive seasons, 1931 and 1932. These accolades underscored his excellence between the pipes. Gardiner recorded 42 shutouts during his NHL career, an impressive statistic that demonstrates his ability to keep opposing teams off the scoreboard. His shutout prowess was a testament to his exceptional skills as a goaltender. Chuck Gardiner's legacy in the NHL extends beyond his remarkable statistics. He was a trailblazer for goaltenders in the league, setting a high standard for excellence in the position. His calm and collected demeanor on the ice, combined with his outstanding technical abilities, influenced future generations of goaltenders. Unfortunately, Gardiner passed away on June 13, 1934, as a result of a brain hemorrhage. His death, just a few weeks after winning the Stanley Cup, was one of the most poignant stories of the NHL's early days. In 1945, Chuck Gardiner was posthumously inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. His induction was a recognition of his outstanding career and the significant impact he had on the game. Gardiner's legacy lives on in the NHL, as he remains one of the most celebrated goaltenders in the history of the sport. Chuck Gardiner's hockey career was defined by remarkable statistics, unmatched goaltending skills, and a lasting impact on the NHL. His contributions to the Chicago Blackhawks, including a Stanley Cup championship, cemented his status as a hockey legend. Chuck Gardiner's name will forever be associated with excellence in the crease, earning him a well-deserved place in the NHL Hall of Fame.
Abby Goodfellow, a revered figure in the annals of hockey history, graced the NHL with his exceptional skills as both a player and a coach. Born on April 9, 1906, in Fergus, Ontario, Canada, Goodfellow's legacy is immortalized in the Hockey Hall of Fame, where he was rightfully inducted in 1963. Goodfellow's playing career spanned from 1929 to 1944, primarily with the Detroit Red Wings, known then as the Detroit Falcons. A versatile athlete, he showcased his prowess both as a defenseman and a center, leaving an indelible mark on the game. Goodfellow's NHL journey commenced in 1929 with the Detroit Falcons, later renamed the Red Wings. Over the course of his illustrious career, he played over 600 regular season games, accumulating an impressive 326 points. Known for his offensive contributions, Goodfellow's stats reveal a player who not only excelled in defensive duties, but also had a significant impact in scoring. In addition to his regular season exploits, Goodfellow elevated his game during the playoffs, proving instrumental in the Red Wings' success. His leadership on the ice, combined with his ability to deliver in high-pressure situations, contributed to multiple Stanley Cup victories for Detroit in 1936, 1937, and 1943. The captaincy of an NHL team is an honor reserved for those with exceptional leadership qualities. Goodfellow embodied these qualities, serving as the captain of the Red Wings from 1934 to 1941. His leadership extended beyond the score sheet, influencing his teammates to achieve collective success. Abby Goodfellow's impact on the sport extends beyond statistics and championships. His induction into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1963 is a testament to his enduring legacy. Goodfellow's contributions as a player and coach continue to inspire generations of hockey enthusiasts. Abby Goodfellow's journey in the NHL is a story of versatility, leadership, and enduring excellence. His statistics, championships, and Hall of Fame induction collectively tell the tale of a player who not only left an indelible mark on the game, but also contributed significantly to its evolution. As we reflect on the storied history of the NHL, Abby Goodfellow's name stands as a symbol of greatness and a reminder of the timeless allure of hockey. So what are your thoughts about Abby Goodfellow? Do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame? Write in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe and like and share this video. Thanks for watching. George Hainsworth was a legendary goaltender in the National Hockey League who left an indelible mark on the sport. Inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1961, Hainsworth's career spanned from 1926 to 1937, during which he achieved remarkable success and set numerous records. Hainsworth began his NHL career with the Montreal Canadiens in the 1926 to 1927 season. His impact was immediate, as he led the league with a remarkable 22 shutouts in his rookie year. This impressive feat remains an NHL record to this day, showcasing Hainsworth's extraordinary skills between the pipes. His outstanding play helped the Canadiens secure the Stanley Cup in 1928, solidifying his reputation as one of the premier goaltenders of his era. The 1928 to 1929 season saw Hainsworth reach even greater heights. He recorded an astounding 22 shutouts in a 44-game season, a feat that stands as one of the most remarkable achievements in NHL history. Additionally, his goals against average (GAA) during that season was a mere 0.92, further highlighting his dominance. And surprisingly, he won the Vezina Trophy, awarded to the league's top goaltender, an impressive 3 times in his career. Throughout his tenure with the Canadiens, Hainsworth consistently displayed a level of goaltending excellence that set him apart from his peers. His remarkable reflexes, positioning, and ability to make crucial saves in pressure situations contributed to his team's success. He played a pivotal role in Montreal's back-to-back Stanley Cup victories in 1930 and 1931. In 1933, Hainsworth was traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he continued to perform at a high level. Although he didn't capture another Stanley Cup with the Maple Leafs, his impact in the game remained significant. His final season in the NHL was in 1937, capping off a remarkable career that left an enduring legacy. Statistically, George Hainsworth finished his career with 94 shutouts, a record that stood for many years until it was eventually surpassed. His career GAA of 1.93 is a testament to his consistency and excellence throughout his time in the NHL. George Hainsworth's contributions to the NHL and the sport of hockey as a whole are undeniable. His records and achievements speak to his unparalleled skill as a goaltender, and his induction into the Hockey Hall of Fame immortalizes his legacy. Hainsworth's impact on the game continues to be felt, serving as an inspiration for future generations of goaltenders striving for greatness in the crease. So what are your thoughts about George Hainsworth? Do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame? Write in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Thanks for watching. Brian Hextall was a prominent NHL Hall of Famer known for his exceptional skills on the ice. Born on July 31, 1913, in Grenfell, Saskatchewan, Canada, Hextall had a remarkable career that left a lasting impact on the sport of hockey. Brian Hextall's journey in the world of hockey began at a young age. Growing up in a hockey-loving family, he quickly developed a passion for the sport. Hextall honed his skills on local rinks and soon caught the attention of scouts with his natural talent and determination. Hextall made his NHL debut with the New York Rangers in the 1936-1937 season. His style of play, characterized by speed, agility, and a powerful shot, set him apart from his peers. Hextall's impact was immediate, and he became a key player for the Rangers. In the 1939-1940 season, Hextall played a crucial role in leading the New York Rangers to a Stanley Cup victory. His offensive prowess and goal-scoring ability contributed significantly to the team's success, solidifying his reputation as one of the league's top players. What set Brian Hextall apart was his versatility. Not only was he an exceptional goal scorer, but he also showcased offensive skills that made him a well-rounded player. His ability to adapt to different situations on the ice made him a valuable asset to any team he played for. Hextall's illustrious career is marked by numerous accolades and achievements. He was a 4-time All-Star and consistently ranked among the league leaders in goals and points. His impact on the game was not only statistical but also cultural, as he became a beloved figure in the hockey community. After a successful career spanning over a decade, Brian Hextall retired from professional hockey. In recognition of his outstanding contributions to the sport, he was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1969. This honor solidified his legacy as one of the all-time greats in NHL history. Following his retirement, Hextall remained involved in the hockey world. Whether mentoring young players or participating in community events, he continued to be a positive influence on the sport he loved. Brian Hextall's impact on the NHL extended beyond the statistics. His skill, versatility, and love for the game left an indelible mark on hockey history. As a Hall of Famer, his legacy continues to inspire future generations of players and fans alike, ensuring that his contributions to the sport will be remembered for years to come. So what are your thoughts about Brian Hextall? Do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame? Write in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Thanks for watching. Red Horner, born on May 28, 1909, was a Canadian ice hockey player known for his tenacious play and leadership on the ice. Horner's career spanned the early decades of the National Hockey League. Red Horner's journey into professional hockey began when he joined the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 1928-1929 season. Known for his physical play, Horner quickly earned a reputation as a tough and gritty defenseman. His style of play made an immediate impact, and he became a fan favorite in Toronto. Red Horner played 490 regular season games in the NHL during his career, all of them with the Toronto Maple Leafs. His consistency and durability were evident as he maintained a regular presence in the lineup. While Horner was primarily known for his defensive skills, he also contributed offensively. Over his career, he scored 46 goals and assisted on 78 others, showcasing his ability to make plays at both ends of the ice. Horner's physical style of play often led to penalties, and he accumulated a significant number of penalty minutes. Throughout his career, he spent a total of 1,264 minutes in the penalty box, a testament to his aggressive and hard-hitting approach. In the 1937-1938 season, Red Horner was named the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, a position he held until his retirement in 1940. His leadership qualities were crucial in guiding the team through various challenges. Horner was part of the Toronto Maple Leafs Stanley Cup winning team in the 1931-1932 seasons. His contributions to the team's success solidified his place in NHL history. Red Horner was selected to the NHL All-Star team 3 times during his career, 1934, 1936, and 1938, showcasing his recognition as one of the league's top players. Red Horner's induction into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1965 was a fitting tribute to a player who left an indelible mark on the NHL. His tenacity, leadership, and contributions to the Toronto Maple Leafs' success make him a legendary figure in the history of hockey. So what are your thoughts about Red Horner? Do you think he should or not be in the Hall of Fame? Write in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Thanks for watching.